Enlightenment is not something you achieve, it is something you remember. I want to begin this article with a very simple truth, yet one that is very difficult for the human mind to accept. No one becomes enlightened. Only an awakening from the illusion that one has never been enlightened. Paramahansa Yogananda once said, not in flowery words, but through his own life, that humans do not need to create divinity, they only need to stop forgetting that they are divinity. In today's world, the word enlightenment is shrouded in many misunderstandings. People think of it as a transcendental state, a higher level than others, a title for saints detached from life. But you see, if enlightenment causes you to detach yourself from life, then it is not enlightenment, but merely another subtle form of the ego. According to ancient Indian wisdom, enlightenment is a return to pure awareness, where you are no longer imprisoned by thoughts. You are no longer controlled by emotions. You no longer identify yourself with your body, your role, your personal history. And from that state, very special experiences begin to emerge, not noisy, not ostentatious, but completely changing the way you live, love, and exist. The enlightened person experiences a silent change in their awareness of the self. The first and most profound thing an enlightened person experiences is the self is no longer the center of existence. In Vedanta philosophy, the individual self, ego, is not seen as the enemy. It is simply a temporary tool for the soul to experience the physical world. The problem is not that you have an ego. The problem is that you believe you are that ego. Paramahansa Yogananda calls this false identification. 1. When I is no longer a personal story. Unawakened people often live in a constant inner narrative. Who am I? What have I experienced? How have I been hurt? How do I need to be recognized? But when enlightenment begins to sprout, something very strange happens. You still have thoughts, but you are no longer trapped in them. You begin to realize thoughts come and go. Emotions arise and cease. Memories are just mental images. And you naturally take a step back. Not by effort, not through discipline, but through gentle awareness. Yogananda calls this state the observer dwelling in the soul. 2. The ego dissolves without being destroyed. Many people mistakenly believe that enlightenment is killing the ego. This is a dangerous misunderstanding. The ego doesn't need to be killed. It just needs to cease being king. When you no longer take the ego as the center, you don't need to protect your image. You don't need to prove yourself right. You are no longer deeply offended. Not because you become cold, but because you have reached a deeper level of yourself where there is nothing to be hurt. 3. Freedom comes from not needing to be anyone else. One of the most liberating experiences of an enlightened person is you are no longer pressured to become a certain version of yourself. You don't need to be perfect. Be more spiritual than others. Be special. You just need to be fully present. And in that presence, a miracle happens. Actions become right. Words become true. Life flows harmoniously through you. Not because you control life, but because you no longer obstruct the flow of universal intelligence. Enlightened people perceive the presence of God in every moment of daily life. One of the most profound changes that Paramahansa Yogananda often emphasized is God is no longer a belief, but a living experience. 1. God is no longer above, but everywhere. Unawakened people seek God in scriptures, in temples, in rituals. Enlightened people are different. They perceive God in their breath, in the eyes of the person opposite them, in the silence between two thoughts. Yogananda describes God as a light with wisdom, unconditional love. Consciousness is becoming self-aware. 2. Samadhi is no longer a rare experience. In the yoga tradition, samadhi is often considered the pinnacle of meditation. But Yogananda expanded this definition. Samadhi can permeate daily life. When you work without attachment, love without possessiveness, be present without judgment, you are living in a light samadhi, a state of silent union between man and the universe. 3. Every moment becomes sacred. Enlightened people don't need to do extraordinary things to feel sacred. They feel sacred when they take a sip of water, they listen to the wind, they sit still doing nothing, because they are no longer separate from life. Enlightened people no longer live in fear, but in absolute trust in universal law. If you ask me, what is the biggest difference between an awakened person and a person still asleep? I wouldn't say it's knowledge, nor would I say it's spiritual power. It's their relationship with fear. 1. Fear disappears not because life is safer. Enlightened people don't live in a less volatile world. They still experience loss, experience challenges, experience moments of uncertainty. But one thing has fundamentally changed. They no longer interpret life through the lens of fear. Paramahansa Yogananda taught, fear is a sign of forgetting one's own divine nature. When you believe that you are merely this body, this mind, this personal history, fear is inevitable. But when your awareness opens, when you know you are a soul experiencing, natural fear loses its foundation. 2. The universal law is no longer a concept, but a lived experience. The unawakened hope life will be good. The enlightened trust, not blind faith, but trust born from a profound intuitive understanding of the universal law. Yogananda often emphasized, there is no randomness, there is no error. Nothing happens outside of the supreme wisdom. Every experience is a precise movement of universal consciousness to awaken the soul. When this is no longer a philosophy, but becomes an inner experience, you no longer ask, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what is being revealed through this experience? 3. Letting go of control, the gateway to true freedom. A profound paradox that enlightened people experience is backhand index pointing right. When you stop trying to control your life, life begins to support you. Those who live in fear always want to know the outcome beforehand, to control the future, to avoid risks. But enlightened people understand that the individual mind is too small to guide the entire flow of the universe. Divine wisdom always operates beyond human logic. Therefore, they learn to act wholeheartedly, but let go of the results. Do their part, then leave the rest to God. Not passivity, but a profound cooperation with the universal law. For peace is no longer threatened by the future. A very clear sign of an enlightened person is backhand index pointing right. They no longer live in obsession with tomorrow. The future is no longer a threat. The past is no longer a burden, because they have anchored their awareness to the present. Presence. Wisdom is alive right now. And in that space, fear cannot survive. Enlightened people experience a form of happiness that is not dependent on circumstances. There is a truth that is very difficult for the human mind to accept. Backhand index pointing right. The happiness you are seeking outside has never been there. Paramahansa Yogananda did not deny the joy of life, but he pointed out something deeper. Backhand index pointing right. All happiness that depends on circumstances is fragile. 1. The difference between joy and bliss. The unawakened confuse pleasure with happiness, success with peace, excitement with contentment. But the enlightened experience a different level. Backhand index pointing right. Bliss does not come from having more, but from not lacking. Not lacking because there is enough money, there is enough love, there is enough achievement, but because there is no longer a feeling of separation from the source of life. 2. Happiness becomes the foundation, not the reward. A very subtle transformation occurs in the enlightened. Backhand index pointing right. Happiness is no longer the goal, but the underlying state. They don't need everything to be perfect to be happy. They don't wait for life to be perfect to find peace. Because their happiness doesn't come from events, doesn't come from other people, doesn't come from conditions. It comes from a continuous connection with the inner self. Yogananda calls it the quiet joy of a soul that is self-aware. 3. Sadness still comes, but it no longer dominates. An enlightened person is not someone who is never sad. They still have emotions. They still feel deeply. But there is a key difference. Backhand index pointing right. Emotions pass through them, they don't define them. Sadness is felt fully, but not clung to, is not told as a prolonged story of suffering, like clouds drifting across the sky. The sky doesn't need to chase away the clouds. For quiet but enduring happiness, the happiness of an enlightened person is usually not noisy, not ostentatious, does not need recognition, but it has a very clear quality. Backhand index pointing right. Steadfastness. Despite changing circumstances, despite a chaotic world, despite the aging body, within them a quiet stream of peace flows. Not because they avoid suffering, but because they no longer resist reality. Enlightened people live in natural service without trying to be good. One of the most subtle yet clearest signs of an enlightened person is this. Backhand index pointing right. They no longer try to be good. It sounds paradoxical, but if you truly understand, you will see this as one of the purest signs of awakening. 1. When morality no longer comes from effort, but from purity. Unawakened people live according to standards, rules, fear of judgment. They do good because they want recognition. They want to feel right. They want to avoid guilt. But enlightened people are different. Backhand index pointing right. They act rightly not out of obligation, but as a natural reflex of a pure mind. Paramahansa Yogananda once said, "When the heart is purified, goodness flows effortlessly." 2. Service is no longer an action, but a state of being. Enlightened people don't think, "I am helping someone. I am doing good." Because in the very way they listen, speak, be present, there is an uplifting energy. Backhand index pointing right. Their service is not selective, not calculated, not expecting anything in return. Like the sun, it doesn't discriminate against those who deserve its light. 3. Love no longer bears the mark of ego. A profound transformation occurs in enlightened people. Backhand index pointing right. They love without possessiveness. They love not to fill in the void, find security, affirm their self-worth. They love because. Backhand index pointing right. Truth. Enlightened people have deeper emotions, but they aren't swept away by them. They may shed tears, be deeply moved, feel heartbroken by the suffering of the world. But emotions don't turn into prolonged suffering. They aren't recounted as personal stories. Emotions come, are embraced, and then fade away. Misunderstanding. 3. Enlightened people must leave the world. Backhand index pointing right. Truth. Enlightenment doesn't require you to leave life, but to leave illusion. Paramahansa Yogananda is living proof. He was active. He taught. He wrote books. He communicated extensively with the world. But he was not bound by the world. Backhand index pointing right. The issue is not where you live, but where you come from. Misunderstanding. 4. Enlightenment is only for the few. Backhand index pointing right. The truth. Enlightenment is the nature of every soul. Not everyone is ready, but no one is excluded. Enlightenment does not choose special